learned a really important lesson when I was in my training and I did an adult medicine rotation. So I had this guy that was like in his mid 20s and he was presenting with 5 days of sickness and 3 days of like really severe headache. And his primary care doctor sent him over because they were concerned that he had meningitis. First couple days just started as like normal viral type symptoms.
Not muted.
And then on day 3, his headache got really bad.
Ryan. Sorry, everyone. We're having slight technical issues right now with the conference software.
Yeah, we're all.
So,
I heard that. I don't know if other people online heard that.
well, yeah, unfortunately, we're using the microphone and everything else on my computer.
Okay.
So
That's why we heard it, I guess.
so we're just trying to reboot the equipment and hopefully that'll fix the issue we had there. It was working earlier this morning. I swear we used it.
Yeah.
It's getting there.
Getting there. Sure. Screen turn off.
It might do.
Yeah, if you have the notes. Take care of it.
So far, my turn as technical czar is going fantastic.
Want to try and do it through somebody's laptop?
Yeah, give it a second or two. Hang on. We're back, hopefully. Right. Well, that, oh.
Moving.
Get my microphone.
Can you hear us?
I'm muting my microphone, but I didn't turn my speaker off.
That's good.
No, that's just the screen. That'll do that periodically.
Yeah.
It's a feature.
So can everyone hear us okay?
Yeah. Okay, back in.
So, Craig, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll go around as we can see people on the screen.
You said me,
Yes.
Craig Pelletier, Director of Asset Management Project Design with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Glad to be with you all today.
And Matt, it's unclear to me whether you're still a member of the committee, but go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll deal with that issue later.
Yeah, no, I'm here as an active member of the public. Thank
Okay.
you for having me. I'm Matt Musgrave with the Associated Builders and Contractors of New Hampshire, Vermont.
And Ellen?
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm mostly here to just watch.
Zach is already introduced himself. Can't see names. Michelle, I believe it is.
I'm Michelle Farnham. I'm with Primer, Piper, Eggleston, and Kramer, just observing.
And Colin. Let's move on to Karen.
Karen Horn, I'm here representing Vermont Gas Systems.
And the note take you see is this automated note taker. William, I believe it is. Oh, Bill.
Yeah, Bill Nash here with ICC folks. Thank you for having me.
Great. Chris Burns, I believe.
Yeah, good afternoon. Chris Burns representing the Burlington Electric Department.
And Liz from EFG.
Hi, Liz Borgay, consultant with EFG.
Peter Tucker. Let's move on. Go ahead. Oh, that was me. Matt Sharp.
Hi, Matt Sharp. I'm representing Efficiency Vermont.
Barry, can you scroll over there? Can't see who's.
Yeah, Ted Brady is next.
Ted Brady?
Yeah.
Hi, Ted Brady from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I'll be joining on video shortly here.
Great.
I think that is everyone unless you want Bishop to introduce himself.
No, that's fine. Great. Anybody who hasn't introduced themselves who's online?
Hi, guys. Peter Tucker, Vermont Association of Realtors.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
And Jennifer Colin from the Vermont Office of Professional Regulation.
Welcome, Jennifer. All right. Before some of you got online, maybe we introduced EFG. Richard Fazy and Zach Tyler. Liz Burgay is also part of that group. They've been hired as facilitators and technical assistants. And just a request to committee members that if there's any offline research that we need done, technical assistance that we need for our work, that those requests come through the department. So normally that would be Kelly Launder, who's out sick today. For today, it'll be myself sitting in for Kelly. Why don't we move on to the agenda, seeing as we're a little bit behind already. Last meeting, at the introductory meeting, we had nominations of Senator Bray and Representative Campbell as co-chairs for this working group. So first order of business is to call a vote on those nominations. All those in favor of those, well, we'll do them both at once, right? Yeah. What's that?
A slate.
A slate, yes. All those in favor of the slate of candidates for co-chair?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Did we lose the
Folks?
room, or is there
Yes.
some deliberative process happening?
Yeah, I certainly can't hear anyone in the room.
Thought they were counting ballots there for a moment.
It appears they can't hear us either.
No.
Well, we can get a lot done then.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
So what I will do is I'll turn on my audio at least, and hopefully people can hear me now.
We can.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
I'm in many places right now. So I can,
Barry, can you text?
not ideal, but I'll move my computer to somewhat nearer where people are talking. Can someone unmute themselves, please, and try and see if we at least get audio through the slice?
Can you hear us now?
Can the folks who are remote hear me if I'm sort of hollering at Barry's laptop from here?
No, I'll move it more into the middle. Okay, so apparently we're not getting anything because I'm assuming Craig is speaking.
Should I turn on my microphone since?
Oh, if you're up there,
this is
yeah.
Speaking here and I'll be speaking next.
Yeah, that would make sense. So let me turn mine off so that
So let me do that. And can people hear me online?
Yes. Yes,
Yes?
Richard, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's start
All right.
again.
So, yeah, thank you. So I was just doubling back to Act 151 to just remind us all of what the powers and duties of the working group are. and that shows up if you're looking at the bill or something on page, begins on page 3. It's brief, so I'll just read it. Provision 1, recommend strategies and programs to increase awareness of and compliance with the RBs and CBs, including the use of appropriate certifications for contractors trained on the energy codes. Secondly, develop plans and recommendations for a potential transition to a comprehensive program for the RBs and CBs at the Division of Fire Safety, including potential funding sources. And 3, consider whether or not the state should adopt a statewide building code. So, I think that foreshadows a big a big piece of work for us to do that, my shorthand for it is that for many reasons, the majority of folks on the last year's working group felt like because fire safety is already frontline doing inspections, et cetera, for like plumbing, electricity, elevators, fire safety, that there was a kind of a natural fit for them being the frontline folks doing review and signing off on building the energy code. But we also acknowledged 101% that the department is already entirely occupied and busy doing the things that already has statutory obligations to do, and that if we're going to move that way, we want it to be, we don't want to move that way unless we can make the department fully funded to take on that work if it's willing to do so. So, I think that was that was the biggest question hanging when we finished up our work. And then there were a lot of subtler things that got addressed in Act 151, but I think for now, just pause there and see if, Scott,
Sure.
do you want to fill in somewhere?
Yeah, well, one thing that I think on the agenda here that we probably should do is approve the minutes from last meeting, just to get that out of the way. And then, I have a couple other comments. So if folks have had a chance to look at the minutes that Kelly sent around, I did notice a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is in the list of introductions, Jennifer Colon is listed as representing the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is a great office, but I don't think it exists. So that should probably be changed to regulation. And one other thing I noticed this would be on the 3rd page, although they're not numbered. At the bottom of the top section there, the last bullet, it mentions that I talked about legislation last year, which that I submitted that included a lot of the points that were in the full report last year, didn't get taken up, and I had put a link. I had mentioned in my remarks last meeting that I would circulate that. I didn't circulate it. I sent it to Kelly, and I don't believe she circulated it either. I did post it in the chat, and I wonder if it would be a good idea to start a resources or something like that section on the web where things like that could be posted. So it seems like it might be a good idea. And those are my only comments on the minutes. Anybody else have any other comments?
So chairs don't get to make motions, so we need someone to volunteer to move the minutes.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
I guess Richard Wabi, I move the minutes. Okay.
Matt Musgrave has a question.
Mr. Chair, I was not at that meeting on the 27th. And it has a wrong company name for me.
There you are. Okay.
Yep.
Good point.
I need to abstain as well when we take the vote. Because I had someone covering for me.
Greg.
So adjust the minutes for Greg and
Do that, Keith. We're getting an echo here.
Yeah, unfortunately, quite figure out how to do that unless maybe Richard, you use your speaker. I don't know if that would make it.
Oh, let me use my speaker too.
So we can hear the other. that might still cause the feedback.
Okay, all right. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks.
One other thing I would mention, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. About the, for the charge of this group, and the report from last year, Kelly did send around, and it included, I don't know, about 10 pages of sort of detailed recommendations for legislative action that I think would form the foundation of what we're working on this year. And I just wanted to emphasize that would be a great thing for everyone on the committee to, and everybody who's participating in the group to review again and have in mind when you're making suggestions about where we go with various aspects of the work here.
Is that I'm not seeing that on the department's website. Is that a separate document from the full committee report, which is posted on there from last year?
No, it's the committee report, as I'm talking about.
Okay, that's the committee report. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because it was 50 pages, so I something.
But there's 10 pages of
I see, of that. Yes,
right,
okay.
You don't have to read all 50 pages. It's the point.
Right, and then just to help people find, there is I don't know if it had a general circulation. There was a draft work plan that Kelly put out on the 8th of August. And
We're going to go over that and
Yeah.
after Richard's discussions.
right, and I just don't know if people have a copy of it so they can follow along.
Right, and I don't know if that's up on the website
It
either.
is.
It is,
just
okay.
As of today, sorry
Okay.
about that.
Just want to make sure we have all our materials where everyone can get to them. Right.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes,
point of
sir.
order, have we acted on the edits? Okay. We do that.
Thank you. I don't believe we had
I second it.
a vote.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
can I ask, it seems a lot of discussion sharing files or sharing working documents.
Right.
Because in the Teams format that we're all using, there is the ability to share files and save files that we're working on that we can all add to or take away. Could I ask that the chair investigate the ability for us to be able to share files through that medium?
Sure. I think, we've done some of that. I don't know that we have a formal process set up for it, but in general, we, Ethan Barry, didn't we had like a, within the department's website, we had our own working group.
You had our
Bot,
own web page where we could share the information, but that would allow editing and commenting.
But you can do it in Teams.
You can do it in Teams, but I don't know that we can do that with external people in Teams. Our Teams is pretty locked down.
We may be able to do that.
Yeah, we can.
We can do that. I'm not sure if there are state restrictions, but we have the full.
How does that interact with the open meeting law?
I can't answer that question.
It's Ben Civility question. Is Ben staffing the working group as a lawyer?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right. He should be attending these.
Okay, so maybe we could check in with Ben, because Scott's question is a good one. We always have to be very careful to make sure that what we share, the public can also see. So thanks, Richard, for that
Thank you.
suggestion. Keith, can you check with, or I don't know, I've been looking at you, Keith, because you're Kelly today.
I'm Kelly today. What's the question?
Well, if we can check out having a
Yeah.
site that we can upload and put documents on, even if it's not
Yeah.
necessarily Teams. And maybe it always means that someone sends it to you and, department actually puts it up on the site, but
Yeah.
that people have access to a common folder, that kind of thing.
Yeah, just to channel Ben a little bit, doing sharing documents via email would constitute an actual public meeting. So it would have to be noticed and everything. So be very careful if you're sharing something with committee members that you don't hit reply all, let's say, and share a document, because that would constitute a meeting. And we have to abide by the open meetings law. So having a SharePoint site would be ideal. And we'll look into what the best way is to do that.
Thank you very much. Scott, anything else? I mean, step on your own.
I think that's it.
Okay. So I think then hand it off to you, Richard.
Okay. I'm gonna do this, and hopefully this will come up there. Okay, there we go. Okay, so next item on the agenda is for me to provide an update on our Vermont Building Energy Code Administration Project. We've been talking about this for a couple of years because it's been that long in the making. And so I've got, I don't know, probably about 20-25 minutes of presentation. I'm happy to answer clarifying questions along the way, but I also wanted to have some time at the end for any sort of discussion, because I think part of what we're doing here under this DOE Department of Energy grant effort dovetails nicely with the work at hand for this working group. So I'll be yeah. Okay.
I've got a screen that says can't display content, so I'm not seeing anything.
Is that the case with everybody else?
I can see
Same
you.
here.
I can see it.
I can view it.
Huh. I'm not sure, Peter. Let's see. I'll talk. I could talk my way through it.
Can you send it?
I could send it to him, but I have it on my screen, so maybe Zach could send it to him. So we'll get you a copy, Peter.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Thanks.
If you need a copy, can you put your email in the chat?
Yeah. Did you catch that?
I'll send it over.
Yeah. So if anybody if anybody can't see it, please drop your email address in the chat, and Zach will send a copy over. Okay. So I just want to check on the timing too. It's 1:30. Are we going till 2 o'clock or so? Or
That's right.
is that about right? Okay. No signal. I'm calling.
It's still working.
So if people are on Teams, then you can see it on your screen. Okay, we're just not seeing it in the room. Okay, so I'm going to go through. The agenda is slide 2. Talk about the team, this DOE project. I'm sorry for. Well, I'll just keep talking, and I guess Barry will be able to connect us back up. The Energy Code Administration Plan, which is sort of the big deliverable for this project, Community Benefits Plan, the Advisory Committee that's part of this effort, Energy Code Professionals Plan, the funding model, and where we are currently in this project, and then open things up for Q&A. So with that, slide 3. So we submitted this proposal to the Department of Energy about a year ago, and included as part of the team the Vermont Secretaries. Chris, yeah, can you? Great, thank you. We needed to have a state agency to lead this effort to pursue the funding, and so the Vermont Secretary of State and the Office of Professional Regulation stepped up. So they are our state sponsor. Included as well as part of the team are the International Code Council, Burlington Electric Department, Efficiency Vermont, Vermont Gas Systems, and the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, or VAPTA. So they are the sort of core members of the team, and we're working with them at this point in time. So what this grant is, the RECI is what DOE calls this, Resilient and Efficient Codes Implementation Funding Opportunity Announcement, or FOA. So it's basically DOE put out this FOA underneath the energy codes mantle, and we applied for it. We applied for $5 million, actually, thinking that a bulk of that funding could go towards future staff positions at the yet to be determined authority having jurisdiction. But DOE liked the idea of supporting Vermont, but scaled back our request from $5 million to $1 million. This was funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and we were one of 27 projects that received this funding, really across the U.S. and all the way up to Alaska. So we received the award after lots of negotiations and back and forth and scaling the project down by 80%, and received the final award in May. This is a 3-year project that began in January and is split into 2 budget periods. Really, we don't enter budget period 2 until we complete all of the tasks in budget period 1. So there's sort of a stage gate approach that this follows. So the overall project goal is pretty straightforward, but we know is a steep hill to climb. So we are developing energy code administration plan for Vermont, including a proposed funding mechanism that will lay the groundwork for future implementation of a code compliance mechanism, ultimately resulting in significant and sustained reductions in energy use. So we're really focusing on trying to improve Vermont's code compliance and figuring out how to make that work. But that really is, well, many of the other projects are focused on adopting more aggressive or better performing codes. We feel like we've got a great code in Vermont. We just need to focus on the compliance piece of that. So that's really the focus of this. There are a number of buckets, areas that we're focusing on. There's a lot of detail behind these, but just in terms of project summary, our ultimate deliverable is this energy code administration plan. And so the number of pieces, all the rest of the work that we're doing sort of feeds into this ECA, or energy code administration plan. So this includes a piece of this. We are, and we'll mention this a couple times throughout here, envisioning that there's an infrastructure of energy code professionals in Vermont that could help us with this work. These would be BPI certified professionals, HERS raters, others with credentials and expertise in building science and energy issues that could help in compliance efforts. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but it seems like there's potential there. There's also, we know right now that one of the major ways that the code is complied with is through town clerks and other administrative people at the town and municipality level, verifying that there is a RB's or CB's certificate on file. So how can we how can we work with the municipalities and do outreach and education? So VAPTA is helping us with that, and we're putting together a plan right now. A big question behind all this as well too is what is this going to cost and how are we going to fund it? So funding model is one of the big pieces of this as well too. And I think that this is something we'll come back to, and we think this is really going to help the discussions that we have here, because ultimately we need to know what this costs and how we're going to fund it. So as part of all this too, a big piece of what we're doing with the energy efficiency utilities, led by Efficiency Vermont, but supported by BED and VGS, is recruitment training. I'm sorry. So this is recruitment training and support of energy professionals. So I've spoken to that. But then as the next bullet, develop energy code support materials and trainings, and then actually carrying out those trainings. So the Efficiency Vermont, BED, and VGS are really going to be on the front lines, helping us connect to the builders, contractors, trade associations, other stakeholders, designers that are out there, educating on the code and providing that technical assistance. We have in the budget hiring of a circuit rider, a full-time person whose job is to really be out in the marketplace, ensuring good information, sharing, supporting, providing technical assistance, going to job sites, going to meetings, being sort of the face of the energy code. So this is something we'll start developing job description the end of this year. We'll have to figure out, is this a hired position? Is this going to be contracted? We don't have the details yet, but having somebody whose sole job is to focus on the code is one of the key pieces of this effort. I mentioned municipality outreach, training, resources, and support. And then working all of this as well too with coordinating with the project advisory committee. And so I'll talk a little bit about we made some progress there. I'll talk a little bit about that advisory committee and how it relates to this group as well in a second. So this overall Energy Code Administration Plan will have a number of pieces. We've already talked about some of this, but some of it too we'll be spending some time with this working group. So working with the Office of Professional Regulation and the certifications around builder, contractor knowledge on the energy code is going to be an important component of our work. And I think we spent quite a bit of time last year in last year's working group talking about that. This role, figuring out what the role of the energy code professionals might be, marketing and awareness campaigns to make sure the word gets out there, the circuit rider details and job description, training and education on RBs. There's some other ideas too that have been floated along the way and that we want to pursue, including talking to insurance companies, mortgage lenders. There's some opportunities we see there. They've got an interest in making sure that the homes that they insure or finance are efficient or at least built to code. And as well too, there's some movement afoot at the secondary mortgage markets. Mortgage lenders, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are the primary ones federally, nationally, that are considering actually requiring compliance with energy code as part of their mortgage lending. So are there some opportunities there that we might leverage? FHA and VA have already instituted that requirement for their mortgages. So they're understanding what that looks like and what the opportunities are. We think it's an important piece of this plan.
It started.
Okay. So another piece too that we think has some great potential is providing savings attribution for code support work with the energy efficiency utilities. If VGS and BED and Efficiency Vermont can claim savings for increasing code compliance, maybe there's an incentive for them to do more of this work. I'll say it again that I don't see how we're going to get to the state's net zero ready code by 2030 without the efficiency utilities at the table and supporting builders and designers and contractors. So figuring out what that looks like is going to be an important part of compliance going forward. And so that's part of this as well.
Richard, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Can you remind me where do we express the net zero ready by 2030 target? Or
it's in the state energy plan. The 2021, when was the last? 2020. 2020? 2022.
It's the same time as the climate action plan.
Okay. It was also in the previous one as well too. I think it was initially in 2016 or whatever the previous one was, but then it was
updated around the same
2022. So it is expressed in that plan. Yeah.
Okay.
Could be wrong.
Right. And well, because targets, like we've differentiated, like Global Warming Solutions Act turned targets into legally binding deliverables. And I just wanted to make sure I know exactly how we refer to this, if we've, bound ourselves to that.
I think it's a
We've-
goal.
We've
And
set it as a goal.
yeah, I believe that's right. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's the case. So.
Thank you.
Understanding the role of the EEUs in this effort. We've also last year talked a lot about the fact that there's no central database of RB certification, documentation, and tracking. It's in file cabinets, probably in paper copies in 252 towns around the state. And so some way that could be centralized and become a resource is part of this. The role of Division of Fire Safety and the Public Service Department going forward and a funding model are all elements of the plan that we'll be working on over the next year, two and a half years. So
Can I jump in to offer one comment? So people probably followed to some degree the H687, which became Act 181, which is the Act 250/housing bill. And one of the things the legislature did was to expand those designated areas that towns have with a half-mile radius for all of them, but village centers, which got a quarter-mile radius. And that area that's outside the district proper, but in this expanded area, are all incentivized for priority housing projects, which include affordable housing. And under law, affordable housing is built to the stretch code. So the work we're doing is actually, actively feeding one of the major pushes in the state for affordable housing. And so it's being moved back to the center of the conversation yet again as an important thing for us to improve our overall performance.
Richard Wabi, just a point of clarification, where did the plan elements come from?
We've been building out an outline as we've been moving forward. So it's in flux. It's a work in progress, but we've actually submitted an outline of this to the Department of Energy as one of our early deliverables. I actually just sent an updated version of that this morning to them. So yeah, it's come from us through this process.
Okay, thank you.
And we're certainly we expect, and I was going to sort of get to this at the end, but I think you provide an opportunity here. We think that there's a great opportunity for this work to collaborate and for what comes out of this working group to feed this DOE grant work and vice versa. So this is a work in progress. Yeah. So just I just want to mention this because this is a sort of a different perspective and approach from the working group that we have been focusing on here. Department of Energy, as part of their grants these days, everybody, any grant that they fund has to have a community benefits plan as part of it, is my understanding. And so this really, DOE wanted all the applicants to take into consideration on the second bullet here, the sort of 4 points: support meaningful community and labor engagement, invest in America's workforce, advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility, and align with the Justice 40 initiative. These were sort of overarching objectives that we need to think about. We needed to think about as part of our application. So in consideration of those elements, usually that's not part of the discussions we have in this state around energy. I mean, there's an increasing awareness of equity and inclusion, but it hasn't historically been something we've focused on. So we, as part of what we're doing as part of this grant, we are committed to, and I'll talk about it in the next slide, reaching out to at least 6 organizations representing environmental and economic justice communities to participate in our advisory committee, informing them, what's in their interest, how, and there's some mutual interest there, working with these communities as part of this project. And so we're working with them as we move forward and making sure that their input is part of this whole process. So this is not only sort of hearing their perspective, but we also think that there may be opportunities to work with some of these non-conventionally groups that aren't conventionally or haven't historically been part of this conversation, to see whether there might be opportunities for employment, for working in their housing stock, and providing input as part of the plan. So with that in mind, we've assembled an advisory committee along with some sort of overarching mission and tasks. These include providing input and guidance to our project team and putting this energy code administration plan together. We are looking at systems and processes as part of that. We're asking them to, as part of this, to coordinate within any future authority having jurisdiction and other agencies to provide guidance and implementation of that plan. Are there some Vermont-specific training certifications that would be helpful to engage these communities? Ongoing education and training, and basically providing feedback into the development of the plan that could potentially also enable them to become energy professionals and help support code compliance too. So this is, I mean, we're seeing this as a voice that isn't always at the table, and we've reached out to. We had our first advisory committee meeting last week, Zach. And so these are the members of the advisory committee. In addition to the team members that I had listed originally, there are a number of others that are part of this at the table. So VCAN, Vermont Energy and Climate Action Network, Vermont Works for Women, Rights and Democracy, Vermont Council on Rural Development, Vermont League of Cities and Towns is at the table here. Town of Hartford has an interest in this. Some specific HERS raters, Good Kind Inspections is an inspector and a home energy rating system professional as well too. Our team members, Vermont Gas, ICC, Department of Public Service, Efficiency Vermont, but then we're also bringing in some regional expertise too through the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, or NEEP, national expertise through the New Buildings Institute, and then VAPTA and BED and OPR are part of our team. But these are the members of the advisory committee meeting with some new voices at the table. We hope will provide some different perspectives. So I mentioned this sort of shifting to the Energy Code Professionals Plan. I have one slide sort of on each of these plans and each of these efforts that I had outlined previously. But I probably have spoken to much of this, but we do envision a potential role for energy code professionals in the work that we're doing. So some of these roles could be potentially supporting compliance through home inspectors, HERS raters, energy auditors, etc. There could be enhancement activities to help with compliance through technical assistance to builders, design professionals, subcontractors, doing testing, modeling, code interpretation, and then potentially enforcement activities too. There could be a role on behalf of the authority having jurisdiction. So we'll be exploring this a little bit too. Part of our grant is to have sort of 6 in-depth interviews with representatives who could be playing a role in this area. We'll be learning what expertise they have, what perspective they might bring. Initial sort of informal discussions have led to some that are really interested in this as a potential sort of line of work and interest in supporting helping Vermont increase compliance. Are we having technical issues? Okay. Should I keep going?
Oh,
Can others see my screen and hear me online?
I believe so.
Yeah, yes? Okay.
I can
Okay, I'm gonna
see it.
Okay, I'm going to keep going then. I don't want to run out of time here. So I mentioned I'm close to the end. I mentioned as well too the funding model, and I saw some heads nodding that this is something that we think might be of value. So we are really, Zach has started modeling this out, building a tool that would help us ask some questions and provide some answers. This includes researching different funding methods for code compliance and enforcement from other jurisdictions. Understand, we're also, I didn't mention previously, but as part of this grant, I did mention we're one of 27 recipients. The Department of Energy has assembled us all into a code collaborative. And so there's information sharing and some opportunities on a regular basis to convene. And so we see this as a useful mechanism for understanding what's worked and what hasn't worked and asking questions about what other jurisdictions have done. So we'll be building on those relationships as well, pulling information in. So we'll be looking at what others have done. We'll be with the goal here is really to figure out how to raise enough revenue. Excuse me?
Okay, मैं मंगा रही हूँ.
Could you mute yourself, whoever that is?
I know मैं meeting start हो गई थी ना मेरी.
Hello, can HI who mute yourself? Thank you. Okay. So the goal here is to figure out how to raise enough revenues to support what the plan actually puts in place. Want to consider pros and cons of different elements, ability to scale, likely, what are the likely potential funding sources, and what are some of the limitations of rolling those out. So we'll be building this model, looking at construction volume, some sensitivities there, inspection rate, whether there's what the cost might be for some of the fixed and variable costs, including building out a statewide database, permitting fees, staffing considerations, etc. So this is a work in progress, and we were anticipating sort of sharing early results. I don't want to make any promises, Zach, September, maybe?
Yeah.
Sometime this fall.
Yes.
I think we've got a good start, but this will be, we think this will be a useful tool for all of us, and as we ask some questions and try to figure out what this is going to cost.
Quick question, you're part of this larger group through DOE, right?
Yeah.
So do you have access to them? Can you like poll them and say, how do you fund energy code compliance work in your state?
Yes. Yeah. So if there are sort of larger questions, I mean, Sandy was our resident researcher last year, and we appreciate all of that. And there are others helping Sandy along the way too, but we do have access to this wider network of 26 other grant recipients as well too. And I just had one more slide, and then I can open things up for questions as well too. So where are we with all this? I mentioned we were awarded the final contract in May. We have this National Codes Collaborative we've talked about with DOE and other recipients that meets sort of on a regular basis. Some of us were at a conference last week in California, and there are enough of us there where they dedicated part of a day to meeting there in person as well too. We're working through our partner subcontracts. Some of these take a little while to hammer out. We're getting there, making progress. So we're not everybody's under contract yet, but we're on the path there. We've developed a project management plan that DOE has approved. We had the first advisory committee meeting last week. The Energy Code Administration work plan, I mentioned the next draft was submitted to DOE this morning. We're working with DOE, with Efficiency Vermont right now to plan out the trainings. We'll probably have a dozen or 15 different training topics, many of which EVT has already developed. But there are opportunities too to reach out to other audiences and other groups as well too, as we sort of finalize. We need to have a list of the trainings we'll be offering during this grant to DOE by the end of September. So we've got another month or so to finish that up. We've begun work with Office of Professional Regulation on the contractor registry certifications, and hopefully be working with International Codes Council that's got experience doing this with other states. There are some intellectual property issues around ICC's intellectual property and using federal funds to develop new pieces. We have to make sure we nail down so that ICC's IP is protected, but we can also sort of leverage the work that they've done elsewhere to support a contractor registry RB certification as part of the contractor registry. So that'll be ongoing. Working right now with VAPTA and the municipal work plan, and have a draft of that in a month or so. And we're coordinating with the Act 151 working group through our role here and ongoing. So lot going on. It's nice to have some resources from DOE to help support some of these activities, and I think we see it as a benefit to the work that this working group will be doing. So I'm happy to answer any questions or figure out where we go from here. Great. Chris?
So under the plan element, I'm assuming the municipal responsibility required under statute falls under marketing and awareness campaigns. Is that
I'm sorry. The which?
the municipal? I see market. I don't see municipal role called out under the plan elements. So I can only assume it's tucked into one of these other rules.
Yeah, it probably should have been broken out there. There's
Probably should.
Yes. Yeah. Good point.
Because that's a pretty major.
It is.
Right, most of the towns that don't have zoning, I have no idea. I mean, how often are the builders the one that pull a zoning permit? That's generally gonna be the property owner, not the builder. They're not gonna know anything about it.
Right.
So the plan needs to be fairly robust as far as like awareness. A clerk's not gonna know anything about it. They just record. So I'll work with Chittenden County on.
Yeah. So you're aware that the Chittenden, I mean, maybe this is worth letting everybody else know how this structured through VAPTA works. Do you want to share?
They're working, Chittenden County folk are working with you.
Yeah.
But we'll just want to make sure that it doesn't need to be the whole cast of characters, but we just want to make sure that we're capturing like, the rural town. I mean, not the Chittenden County has rural towns, but they also have a good bit as a region, as a county, they have much more robust municipal support staff than any other part of the state. Like in our region, we have our largest town, Brattleboro, population 12,000. Smallest town is Somerset with a population of 6, and everything in between. And if I were to go to any given town and say, have you ever heard of this? Probably I would guess 85% are saying, I don't know what you're talking about. So we just need to have kind of a fairly robust, so that the towns are in compliance with what their responsibilities are. We just need to make sure we're taking into account like all the situations, including those that don't have zoning, where permits aren't full. Because when it comes to building compliance, how are we dealing with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, clearly that's an oversight that we didn't have a bullet on here, because we have a whole plan that we're working on with VAPTA for that, but you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Mike.
So how statutorily are you applying all the RPs to the single family occupied homes? How is that like statutorily occurring? Or does it have to? Is this something I'm just trying, we have no jurisdiction over single family owner occupied homes. I'm just trying to understand the applicability of regulating energy efficiency on single family owner occupied homes. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no direct enforcement in statute. The only enforcement mechanism right now is civil court. So the purchaser of a home that doesn't meet code can sue the builder to the court. That's really the only mechanism. Municipalities have the option to adopt stretch code and withhold a CO until they meet the provisions of RBs, but that's only been done in a couple municipalities.
Seriously, signed up and there is a question or comment. So great.
Greg?
Richard, the slide you had, and I think it's around here in the middle. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the slide you had in the middle, I think it's around this slide, or with the advisory committee members. I don't think I saw anybody on there directly from the development community. So that was my question. Particularly affordable housing development community.
Good point.
Yeah, so that was my question there. I didn't see anybody from that world in here.
Yeah. Well, initially we had talked about utilizing this workforce from the Act 151 as the advisory committee, and it just felt like it was awfully unwieldy to add these other sort of non-traditional groups, or I don't know how to best characterize them. The groups that haven't necessarily been at the table as part of energy discussions in the past. And so I think that our approach was to sort of look beyond the members that are already participating as part of the working group here and add to it with the idea that we could bring feedback and input from sort of both groups together. And I don't know if at some point in time it makes sense to have a joint meeting. I don't really know where that might go, but it was really in the interest of sort of supplementing the members that are already participating as part of the working group. So I guess that was sort of where we looked at drawing the line. So not that we want to leave anybody out, but there is already, so anyhow.
Yeah, I would say you don't want it to get too unwieldy. I could see why you got all these people on here, but what confused me is you have VGS, Efficiency Vermont, all the folks that are involved in and then you have the people that I would put in that category would say Vermont Works for Women, Rights and Democracy, which is fine. I totally get that, but that's what confused me because it looked like there were some core players on this as well.
Yeah,
but that's fine. If that's how you're thinking about
they
it.
are, they are part of the project team, which is why they're
got it.
So
got it. Okay.
Yeah, Peter.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, good. So I guess that really, for me, begs the question. You said they're part of the project team. So what is the group that we're sitting here today with?
The project team receives funding from DOE. So that's essentially. So thank you for that clarification. Except for OPR, Secretary of State's office, OPR is our state agency, and they did not request any funding as part of this, but they are our sponsor. The rest of the rest of the project team all plays a role and has responsibilities as part of the deliverables and are receiving some funding as part of this DOE grant.
Okay, gotcha. And I guess, so my feeling looking at that, which is equity and diversity, to me, that's that group. It is, and that the more the building community is on this group. But are they reporting to this group for us to make decisions, or are they making decisions that this group is going to be asked to, to approve or to agree to?
I mean, the way that we sort of see it is they're advisors, and we're looking to them for input and suggestions. Ultimately, I think that there's I don't know that we'll have votes necessarily there, but it was a way to broaden the opportunity for input that from groups that usually aren't at the table. I believe that the way that we worked last year on the Act 47 working group would be with that there were some votes along the way, and then minority opinions were noted as well. And I'm looking to the chairs as to how whether that process might be any different this time along.
I thought that worked well for us because we got to come up with recommendations that were supported by a consensus, but not lose the sort of dissenting voices that had something valuable to say. Hey, there's another way to look at it, or fine for you all to say that, but for my shop, that's a problem. You know, that kind of stuff was helpful.
Great, thank you.
I would suggest, you work with the municipal plan with the municipal outreach team, that you create a national flood insurance program annex. Because in many towns, probably maybe as many as 20%, the only permit towns are going to be issuing are flood hazard permits. Because they otherwise don't have any zoning or anything else. And I guarantee you, most people are not going to their floodplain administrator saying, I'm doing work on my house anyway in the floodplain. Much less saying, asking like, what do I need to do to bring this building into energy code compliance? So we need to be thinking, and how many hundreds of homes now and buildings are we talking about that are being refurbished, and having to come into compliance with the flood hazard code plus the building energy code, because for a lot of the buildings, single family homes, this is the only code that's going to be applying, plus the flood hazard code. So where they're in the floodplain. So you need to figure out what that looks like, what advice to give to the municipal floodplain administrators, and what advice we're given as far as like how to bring flooded properties into compliance, and how that factors into what's called substantial damage estimation and substantial, and right, this contributes to once improvements get over 50% of the appraised value, then the full NFIP comes to bear, and everything has to be brought into compliance with the code, like elevation and all that other stuff. So this is not trying to make things complex, but this could blow some towns out of compliance with the NFIP program, which then threatens their ability to remain in the program and people's ability to get flood.
That sounds like something we should understand.
Okay.
Can I ask who was speaking?
Chris Campney. Could you hear him? Chris Campney.
I can hear him. I just don't know who it is.
Okay, sorry about that.
Chris Kemp. Yeah, and I'd like to just weigh in and say that disclosure of flood is a big issue for the Realtor Association now. We're trying to address that portion of Act 181. And there are a lot of questions about, FEMA maps and, how do you know where your house is? So it's very challenging.
Right, and that work came out of two sides. I mean, we had the Flood Safety Act that passed this year that addresses sort of from scratch almost regulating river corridors, floodplains, also addressing wetlands and dams. That it was trying to figure out all the things that are under stress as part of our regular ongoing flooding pressures. And then same time, we're also trying to lean into doing more housing, and whether it's new or refurbishing post flooding. And it's a complex challenge because you don't want to be pushing people out of the National Flood Insurance Program, or that a municipality would lose its eligibility for not enforcing.
And the challenge for so many of our, is that so many of our smaller towns, like the floodplain administrators, are basically volunteers with no training. And so this will be the first time they're hearing any of this.
Richard Wabi, for a point of clarification. You said something, I'm just trying to hold it. The building code we're working with that Mike was asking about is from 2015, am I correct, or is there 2024?
It hasn't been up. I think he's initiated a process to update it, but I think it's from 2015. I think you're right.
2015 with virtually no outside enforcement to it.
For single family owner
That's
owned
all I want to
buildings.
make sure
Yeah,
we're talking. about.
yes.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
well, there is no residential building code.
There's no residential building code.
Well, no statewide adopted residential building code for owner occupied single family.
That's what I'm trying to get clear.
Let's have Mike
Yeah.
answer that. That would be a good, that's okay.
All I'm trying to do is clarify, is there a residential building code in place right now?
No,
Nothing.
well, this is how, at the next meeting on September 10th, I'm gonna do a presentation on kind of an overarching, what is in place and, because there's just been so much, discussion, and I don't think the terminology is being used the same across the board. We use the IBC for 3 units and above. So that is the International Building Code. So we use that now for everything over 3 units. 1 and 2 family dwellings where we have jurisdiction, we use the Life Safety Code and several amendments that are found in our Vermont Fire and Building Safety Code. We do not use the IRC on 1 and 2 family dwellings. There might be a couple municipalities, maybe Burlington. I think Burlington may be the only municipality that's using the IRC right now in Vermont there, but there may be one other municipality. We have a meeting, Tuesday, January 27th with there's about 10 or 12 of us. Richard, you're.
Not January,
No,
September,
August.
August.
August 27th to have our first meeting on the IRC.
Right.
The charge on Act 151, where it says, should the state use a statewide building code? Well, Sandy's pitch on that was, she wanted the IRC adopted so that it could be enforced on single family owner occupied homes. That's what, and she sent an email out to this group providing that type of clarification. So to me, the IRC was not so much of a legislative mandate that we look at the IRC because I'll just be frank, we're at fire safety myself, I'm not supporting extending our jurisdiction into owner occupied homes. So I can tell you, I'm not gonna do that. The administration's not gonna support it. And what this group does, it's obviously what the group does. But my position will be that we're not gonna support that, extending our jurisdiction. So the IRC, the way that we would adopt it, if we did, would apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings. We don't have an issue with 1 and 2 family dwellings, but I'm gonna go over that at the September 10th meeting. And then there's all kinds of challenges that come with adopting the IRC, but I would, rather than betting that right now, I think it's fair to say, let's wait for the group. Because there's some expert folks that chime in on the IRC. And so in all fairness, I don't want my opinion to be loud in any discussions, because I do want to enter that discussion with an open mind.
Question was simple.
Yep.
Do we have a building code today for residential?
Only 3 units and above.
That's all it was. Thank you.
Right, and if I'm remembering right, we're the only state without one for,
Wasn't the question.
I know, I'm just.
No,
for-
there
for context.
are a lot of states out there that probably don't have a building code for residential. But Bill, I think Bill's on, he could probably answer that.
Sandy Henry.
Okay. That was, that's,
Sure.
I was just clarifying.
Sandy Henry.
Yeah, if Bill is muted, I can say that we are the only state in the union that has no path for a municipal or state jurisdiction to create regulations for single family homes. There are some states that have almost nothing, and there's a lot of states that make it up to the town to choose or county. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm squinting at the big screen. Any other hands up out there?
No.
Nice question.
Yeah.
Matt Wiltshire, and I just want to understand the work of this project and how it ties in with this working group. So you answered some of this earlier. I just wanted to clarify, you're producing a deliverable, a plan, and you're issuing that to the DOE, and you mentioned that you submitted them. You're submitting a draft soon.
An outline, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the final plan will be delivered to the DOE in December 2026.
Right.
And is that also being delivered to, like, how is that being disseminated in the state? Is it something, do you anticipate this being delivered to the legislature or including acts that will call for legislative response?
That's a great question. It's one we continue to have as well. And how can we collaborate these efforts and leverage on the work on both sides and end up with something that's cohesive and heading in the same direction? So, and as part of putting the outline together for DOE, we've left a number of placeholders, like based on the outcome of the Act 151 working group. And so I think the work that we do as part of this group will certainly bring and put into that plan. There will be opportunities along the way for us to share that out. I don't think we don't have a definitive plan in place, but I think it's only responsible of us to provide opportunity for public input and feedback along the way, given the interest from the groups here. I mean, we want this plan to be useful and to represent the work of people who put a lot of effort into this. And so I think we're open to suggestions and conversations, but we don't know exactly what that looks like. And we're saying we've got a couple years to figure that out, but we want it to be, we want these efforts to be collaborative, to be coordinated and end up with a unified plan at the end.
Yeah, it does seem like there are areas in which there's overlap with this working group, right? And then it seems like there are some areas where there is not overlap, where this working group has, like, for example, the third charge for this working group pertains to a building code.
Yeah.
Which that's probably one piece that's not.
No, we're not taking that one on.
So that's one piece that's not the overlap, but there are others that certainly are.
Right. I mean, really, our target, our focus is code compliance. And so what are the levers we could pull to help support code compliance? And those are the elements that we're trying to focus on.
Compliance with not enforcement.
Enforcement could be some mechanism in the future if that's where we go, but really it's about right now the focus on compliance, not necessarily with enforcement, but that is on the table if that's the direction that the legislature or others want to go as well.
Thank you.
I'll speak to that at the next meeting. I'm sorry.
Any other comments, questions on the plan that Richard walked through?
One last clarification. The work plan that we come out with here in November or whatnot will look in my head similar to the Energy Study Committee report to the legislature of 2023. Am I correct? That's the direction we're headed here.
Well, that's a great segue, actually.
Yeah.
To the next item on the agenda. We're gonna do that now.
Sure. I did have one thing I wanted to chip in on the advisory committee organization slide where we're talking about environmental justice aspects, like adding new voices to the conversation. We passed Act 154 in 2022, the so-called Environmental Justice Bill, and it directs every operating area of state government to bring that perspective to the work of its department, you know, so across the board. ANR went first, you know, so there is an EJ office established immediately under the secretary at under Secretary Moore's office at ANR. And I know that the department also, I think maybe was like sort of the second operating area to come in. And TJ Ford brought that lens to a lot of the work on the imagining the energy future for the state. So I'm not so I'm just noting it for people that probably we want to check in with, or you may want to be checking in with. I don't know that they become active participants, but there's people who have direct experience trying to build a program and bringing in environmental justice perspective. to
Right.
it that they
Okay.
can tap into.
I wasn't aware of that, so thank you for raising that.
Okay, so. Thank you, everyone. So, Scott, you were gonna help us and lead the work plan discussion.
Yeah, so we have theoretically 90 minutes of discussion to do in the next 35 minutes. And the next item was to review the work plan that Kelly had sent out with the meeting invite that I hope folks have had a chance to look at. I guess we'll just go over it quickly and then leave room for some discussion. And in fact, this was part of the reason for also including the full report from last year, from 2023, December 2023, the report of the study committee to my point in mentioning that was to have that inform where we're going with this work plan. And to get back to Richard's comment about where are we going with this, I think the ultimate goal is to come up with some recommendations to flesh out a little bit more of the roadmap for getting to a place of greater energy code compliance, and also to come up with some recommendations for legislative action if that is appropriate in the report for this November. This is a 2-year committee or working group. So this won't be the end. There won't be the final report necessarily. Certainly not the final report for the working group, but it won't be the end of the process. And we also recognize, as we did in the report from last year, that it's a multi-year process to sort of put the elements together. One of the things we recognized was that not having a residential building code, not having a building code office per se, even though Division of Fire Safety does handle building codes in they're called public buildings. We don't really have the infrastructure, the administrative infrastructure for implementing building codes or energy codes as a sort of a full process to include potentially enforcement and penalties. So the work plan that Kelly sent out was just a synopsis of where we go with each meeting. And I thought of it as really setting the foundation and building on the foundation of last year's report. In the first meeting or 2 meetings, and then defining our ultimate goals and specific steps towards those goals to include legislative action, whether in 2025 or 26, that would be needed in order to take those steps. And
Can I say one thing about legislative action?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, I always feel as a legislator on a working group that I don't want to fall into the thing of it's like the only tool I have is a hammer, so everything starts to look like a nail. Like the only tool I have is a law, so we only are drawn to laws. There's
Right.
the strength of this group, I think, so far has been that so much has happened without any kind of statutory. The statutory bones are pretty skinny so far, things, and it's people collaborating in the very best sense of the word. That's helped us make progress.
Yes, yes, sure. I completely agree. I guess my question is, as a person with a hammer, is how can I and how can the legislature facilitate this process? So anyway, going back to the schedule that Kelly had shared, so this meeting we've pretty well almost wrapped up. The next meeting is on September 10th. Mike is going to present on the Division of Fire Safety's working group on potential adoption of a international residential code. And we'll have a discussion about that. And I think that, as Chris Campany has commented, how that interfaces with flood code requirements, I think will be a really important thing to add too. We haven't got it on this list right now, but it had occurred to me somewhere along the line. I think maybe Chris had mentioned this in our introductory meeting, that having some input from the Vermont Energy Management Group could be valuable in that respect as well.
So, so I've reached out to Stephanie Smith. She that administers the state hazard mitigation grant program. It would be good. I've asked her if she could just kind of prepare like a brief summary. I hope you don't mind my asking her to do this. It'd be good to have her just present, it'd probably be briefly to the group about what money the state has to forego because we don't have the international residential code. Just neither here nor there, but just be aware that there's a cost to that. Or an opportunity cost. The other thing is for the floodplain stuff, that would be State Rivers program. So that'd be Rebecca Pfeiffer. If you want to talk about the building energy code, basically how the flood hazard regs work, how the National Flood Insurance Program works. And so that'd be Rob Evans or Rebecca Pfeiffer within ANR. So that's who administers that piece.
And would it be useful to have them at the next meeting if they could do something?
That one or one of them.
Yeah.
We really do need to think through what does this look like, especially when it comes to the municipalities and what they're expected to do as far as when people are coming in asking for permits, because for those towns without zoning, even the ones with it, if the property's in the floodplain, there's gonna be specific things that floodplain administrator is gonna have to look at and take into account. And I haven't even thought that all the way through.
Is the exposure, Chris, that because the RBs are law and that anyone who's going to issuing a permit, a flood hazard program permit, administrator, then needs to notify that individual that in order to rebuild to code, they have to meet all codes that are applicable. And so that people may be inheriting the RVs that they never realized were applicable to them in the first.
Or bringing in this, and then that also triggers the cost of the improvements. Even if the improvement is a restoration after a flood, right? And then that has an effect on, because some of these RVs code things can be expensive.
Sure.
And so that's then going to also factor into how close do you get, or do you exceed that 50% value threshold of the assessed value of the property? And then that triggers like the full NFIP compliance. But that's when you have to start elevating and moving stuff up and all that. So the challenge is, and just for everybody to know, we talked a lot about this in the legislature. There is going to be a study that looks at kind of our current model of flood hazard administration, but the challenge is, in a lot of towns, they don't have like professional zoning administrators, much less flood hazard administrators. And so they're doing this, if they're doing it, I'm not narking on them.
Right.
I mean, it's just, they don't necessarily know what's going on in the floodplain on a general basis, and so there just needs to be awareness of like, hey, when you're issuing permits, this is the only other statewide permit that may have to be applicable to this property in addition, like to, wells and septic or something.
Right.
And so we just need to make sure everybody's well aware of how this stuff comes together. And Rebecca Pfeiffer is the statewide administrator. That's the person FEMA comes to talk to about, statewide compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. She would be the best person who could speak to what all of this looks like, including just the practical aspects for the people that she works with at the town level. What does this mean?
So we should get Rebecca and Stephanie on for next meeting, which is May, because that's another really important piece of the foundation for the whole thing that we're considering here.
And it's not because of I know we've had a lot of flooding. It's not because of that. It's just because for a lot of towns, that if you don't have zoning, that's the only other thing that you're regulating with effect related to the things that fire safety is not regulating, right? Because that's what's important.
Right, and if you don't regulate to the code, or then you're, if the municipality has an enforced code around floodplain, then the municipality the individuals in that floodplain lose eligibility for the National Flood Insurance Program.
FEMA hadn't kicked a lot of towns out, but that's absolutely the risk.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, certainly in light of what's happened the last few weeks, last month, this rebuilding damaged properties to be more resilient for the 500-year floods that are coming every couple of years. Looks like everything, a couple of times a month in some cases. Yeah, we've got to look at that. All right. So the other item another item, number 2 on the list. Oh yeah, we've got it up there. Good. Discuss the estimated cost of a comprehensive program for RVs and CVs and for buildings under the jurisdiction of DFS. Michael is going to talk about that as well. And then we'll have a discussion about what a comprehensive program for RVs and CVs at DFS could look like and potential funding sources. And we hope that perhaps Richard Basie would have something to offer on that from the BCAP meetings. Is that fair?
On the cost,
On potential funding models.
funding models.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we can show what we have at
Yeah.
the next meeting and
It's going to be a packed meeting.
look for feedback.
And then the last thing that Kelly had mentioned, to be determined, a presentation of requested data and research. We haven't, that's the last item on today's agenda or today's work plan that we haven't talked about yet. October 11th meeting, we would discuss other options for comprehensive RVs and CVs administration. That would not include perhaps DFS or not center on DFS. Update on development of RVs contractor certification. We would have OPR providing that information, Office of Professional Regulation, and Richard.
Well,
I
I'm, it's really Jennifer, Colin, right? And I mean,
yeah.
And I'm
Well,
happy to,
Go ahead.
I'm happy to do that on October 11th, sure.
great. We have a check-in, I can provide where we are in that, but really it's OPR driving that.
Yes,
So,
right, yes.
Yeah.
And any further action or recommendations regarding contractor certifications? Be a group discussion and potential findings and recommendations to be included in the final report. Another discussion. And then on October 22nd, just 11 days later, we'll have a continued discussion on those findings and recommendations. And on the 28th, this is not a meeting, but internal deadline for Public Service Department to provide a draft of the legislative report to the working group. And then at the November 1st meeting, review that draft and vote on proposed recommendations. Anybody have any thoughts on that outline? Richard?
Yeah, I'm not a committee member, it's committee member, but as staff, I guess maybe I can make a suggestion. I think, and tell me if I'm off base, Keith and Barry or whoever, but I continue to think, as I mentioned earlier, that the efficiency utilities have the potential to play an important role in all this. And if they can claim savings for supporting code compliance, then there's incentive for them to be engaged and provide support to the building community. And my understanding is that there's current discussions between at least Efficiency Vermont, maybe VGS and DED too, I'm not sure, but with the department. And so is it appropriate to ask for an update or at least have a discussion around that? It feels to me like it's a tremendous opportunity and to bring resources to the table that we haven't really fully considered. And
Yeah, those discussions are underway. I don't want to jinx it by telling you the specifics on what we're talking about, but the department is open to the idea of allowing the EEUs to claim savings to get to code. The question is what form that program's going to take, whether it's going to be an actual, we call the RA budget, the resource acquisition budget. In other words, it'll apply to their performance indicators, or whether it's going to be a pilot that's kind of outside of that regular EEU budget. There's all kinds of options.
Right. I mean, if you're,
Well, I would just ask is what your timeline looks like for that. Do you think you would have an update September 10th, or is that too quick?
We will. We have a meeting with them on Thursday, where that's one of the agenda items.
So maybe we'll look for an update, at least where you are. September 10th, because that again is a foundational item, it seems like.
And that we passed 3 years ago and then just renewed this past legislative session, the Energy Efficiency Modernization Act, which is that pilot that allows them to do non-traditional work, not necessarily energy savings, but emission reduction work. And I don't know if under that umbrella, if they're conducting work that relates to code, but we were trying to loosen things up so that they could get involved in bring their expertise in meeting energy goals and emission goals to bear on projects they do. So I don't know if that's been part of your discussion so far, like if they're wearing sort of their EEMA, Energy Efficiency Modernization hat, or they're just being straight EEUs when they're doing this. But they have two different tools these days to run projects under.
I think the EMA is peripheral to that. It's got to be complementary, and
right.
They already have TEPF, the thermal energy and process fuels programs that are focused on thermal and fossil fuel reduction. So most of their EMA programs are filling in the gaps essentially between electric and thermal programs. So it's related, but I don't think it's directly related to code enforcement, but always good to explore those options. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
So
and we'll have an update at the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I don't always understand what's being said.
It's a little esoteric.
So are we talking about decreasing the costs of putting an energy efficient light in? Or are we talking, and we'll be addressing the increased cost to produce a performing residence?
I think I would say that there's two things going on here. One is we've been focused in the energy efficiency world on reducing energy usage and thereby energy costs. But the other element here that we're working with is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is the mandate of the global warming solution.
That's not what I asked.
No, but I'm getting to that. That other measure, yeah, or that other metric is important for state policy. Does that also help drive programs that are providing incentives to people and building owners to replace lighting, for example, or replace fossil fuel driven appliances with electric, where there might not be a BTU reduction, but there would be a greenhouse gas reduction.
That's still not what I asked.
Okay.
What I asked was, are we trying to address the increased cost to producing or building these residential elements by this offset that you're offering or trying to offer? You
Well,
understand what I'm saying? We have a 14% increase in taxes, 22 in healthcare, and you're gonna tell me it's gonna cost 10% more to build a house with these standards in place.
Well, that's what the incentives would help with.
Yeah.
And that actually is the focus. I mean, sort of the underlying focus of the Affordable Heat Act is to create a mechanism for funding those incentives to help folks transition from fossil fuel based appliances to electric. So the upfront cost is an issue, as you're saying. But the long-term cost might even be positive. The long-term cash flow might even be positive, but it's the upfront cost that is keeping people from being able to do it.
And if the efficiency utilities can claim savings credit for this, then that potentially translates into incentives that can drive down first costs.
But it's gotta be more than that light fixture, right?
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
yeah,
Just wanna make
it's
sure
it's significantly,
Same
yeah,
thing.
it's thousands of, yes.
Is that Craig?
Yeah.
Yes, Craig, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that this conversation that we're just having between Richard, what you had proposed, and then Keith responded with what is happening right now, which I'm glad to hear that meeting's happening between the department, or if I don't know if the PUC is directly involved in that or where that's happening, as the gap between code and above code gets smaller, the whole model of EVT needs to change. And then what the senator just said about alternative scope that's already in statute that EVT can work on. I think within all those three, my inclination is to agree with Richard, but more importantly, I think, Keith, at a minimum, that I hope that group is aware of what this group is doing, and that as these options get hashed out for what the EEUs are going to look like in the future, that the kinds of things that we're participating in things like this and being able to support that kind of expertise, however it's done, I think is a hugely important issue, as you guys all know that have been part of this for a long time, that I've been beating the drum on for a while. So I'm glad to hear, Keith, that that's happening.
Yeah, I just would add to that, in our studies of compliance with RVs, there's the assumption that any builder that participates in a Efficiency Vermont program is going to meet code. So if we kind of flip that on its head, if we can boost participation in Efficiency Vermont programs, we are, as a result, going to boost compliance with the code. And there's got to be some way that we can work out that program participation as a proxy for code compliance, and it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
So.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Sounds very
just a little bit as an aside for everybody. In the almost 20 years I've been in this job now, there's always been a 2-tier incentive level for going above code with EVT for multifamily, which is the world I live in the most. And we've always gone for the high performance home tier, but EVT just eliminated the base tier, as really there's no rationale now that to go to have a 2-tier level. So as the code has got, with this last code cycle, we're starting to butt up against this issue. So it really, the clock is definitely ticking.
Great. Any other comments on the work plan? Right.
Well, I'll just throw one sort of positive thing in. I mean, it's complicated and there are a lot of people working hard on growing programs and making them work well together. You mentioned Affordable Heat Act, which for a whole group of people is sort of hanging out there as people aren't really sure what's coming, but there's, departments doing work, PUCs doing work, information is going to go to the legislature. Legislature will evaluate the information and design an affordable program based on what it learns. The underlying model for me is in the shop that helped write Affordable Heat Act has been looking at Efficiency Vermont itself, where in its first 20 years, it brought in $784 million worth of receipts, investment dollars, electric bill by electric bill, and the total savings achieved under the investments made through the program were $2.8 billion. So a very positive return on investment. There's a time element in it. And so, but, I say that by way of just saying that what an Affordable Heat Act looks like that can perform at that level of having that positive return is, we have to design, but there is a sort of a North Star in that, it's that kind of thing where we make affordable the upfront cost that delivers a savings over time that eclipses that cost. So basically, it's almost a financing question more than as well as what measures are worth implementing.
Chairman Bray, where's that data come from you just quoted?
That comes from
Must be public
And
knowledge, right?
annual report.
the annual report.
I think
from
Efficiency Vermont has on their website, they have annual reports that has that data in it.
I think they are, they have very stringent reporting and auditing requirements ongoing.
I'm just wondering whether there is an objective of coming out of this work for legislation. I mean,
Well, I don't know that we know yet, but there could be. Right?
Okay.
And we have, this is the first year of a biennium coming up, so it would be good to get something, especially if there's something complicated to do. We need to get it started. Of course, this is also the year that we have to work on the Affordable Heat Act report from the EEC. But we'll have to see how
There'll be
that falls out too.
a few people busy on
A
that.
few people busy on that. A few people in this room.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
related question to that, which is the nature of the report, and you asked about this earlier, the nature of the report that we're producing in November of this year. This work plan is great. I look forward to next meeting. This work plan all leads up to the November 2024 report. And I don't know if we know this or not, but I'm wondering what the relationship is between the November 2024 report and the November 2025 report. If it is kind of part 1, part 2, or if it's a draft and then a final.
I see it as part 1, part 2. I think the timing, and I'll defer to the legislators to correct me on this, the timing has to do with informing the next legislative session. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And
So-
submitting requests for bills.
Right, yeah, so, I see the first report as, being filtered, processed by the legislature. Then the results of that legislative session inform how we approach the second report. What further research needs to be done, what ideas have been mixed, what ideas have emerged, that type of thing.
What we learned from the legislative session, we just finished
Right.
all of that.
And that, pretty much happened with the last report. So 2 bills went in. Scott did sort of like, hey, if you took that full report and implemented it, what does that bill look like? And I took a skinny version that said, if we want to keep the working group going, if we want to make progress at OPR, if we want to start to lean in figuring out if DFS can become the eventual home of the regulatory side, how do we advance that conversation? So it was the sort of the full ambitious program, and there's was a less whatever ambitious but important, I think, thing to say. We do want to keep making progress, and I'm not sure where this number ever came from, but that I think last time around we were talking about maybe we're on a 7-year trip from where we were a year ago to a fully functioning program that includes all the kinds of things we've been talking about, like compliance, enforcement, certification, et cetera, training, a fully functioning system that supports energy codes around the state.
But that wasn't in 151, right?
No.
And that has nothing to do with what you were asking. 151, I believe, just asked for a report on where this committee was on November of this year, if I remember correctly. That's what it asked for,
That's the status report, you need.
more or less.
Yeah.
With recommendations.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not disregarding that. I'm just saying that it didn't go into this whole historical future thinking. It was very clear what it was asking for in that legislation that passed.
Right, well, the language is on or before November 15th, 2024 and November 15th, 2025, the working group shall submit a written report to the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Energy and the House Committee on Environment and Energy with its findings and recommendations for legislative action. Right, great. Go to the next thing here.
Yeah. Like for pretty much on time.
Yeah, I'd forgotten we're going to 3:30. I thought we were stopping at 3.
Okay.
Great. All right. Discussion. Data requests, data and or research requests needed for this working group, particularly what might be needed for the legislative report. It's kind of an open discussion about the takeover. Senator.
Well, I'm feeling like we're already we're already engaged in that discussion.
Yeah.
I don't know if people are mapping out the next few meetings, and I think sort of getting ourselves back up to speed as a working group, engaging on particular areas where we know there's work to do. And so, for instance, thanks, Mike, for coming back to sort of reboot the topics, that we've discussed last year, as well as Chris, thanks for reminding us on the flood side of things, because there was a lot of work on every level on flood related stuff, whether out of necessity because places flooded, or the legislature responding to that and trying to say, wait, what kind of a not just a regulatory apparatus do we have, which sounds very controlling, but what kind of useful things have we put into place to help municipalities? Like for instance, river corridors, the Champlain, the watershed to Lake Champlain includes 136 towns. So if you don't regulate as a organic whole, it doesn't really work very well to do piecemeal regulation. And right now, river corridor regulation is at roughly 1 in 10 towns, doesn't? And because when you do something in town, this town, it affects not only towns downstream, but even has upstream effects. So it's really an organic bowl that we were trying to say, oh, we need to, we're a century behind sort of on the weather's moved on us, and we need to move with it. So. Mike.
So
Sir, I need to step out.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry, but I need to take another call and I'll be on this for a few minutes. So my apologies to the group or whatever. I can't avoid
if
this.
we leave, we'll take your laptop.
You can. But thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Yeah,
So you asked about.
Thanks,
data.
Mike.
You asked about data.
Yeah.
That we may want or may not want, and you probably already have it. But I'm curious only because it was brought up earlier. States that already have either a building code or a building energy code.
Yeah, there is a nice chart.
It's in the
report,
appendix of the Act 47 report, actually.
Last year's report.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we all talk about pie in the sky savings. Is there a way to anticipate the actual both energy savings and building savings or development savings?
Development savings.
You mean like operational costs?
Well, we can say I bought an energy efficient light that saved me 5 cents a month.
Right.
We know that.
But what's a code compliant building saving versus a non-code compliant building?
Correct.
Yeah.
Versus, or what's that compliant building saving versus the increase in cost to produce that,
Sure.
that piece?
That's sort of the cost effectiveness calculation. How much of the upfront cost is counter-
Paid off over 20
paid off
years.
over 20, yeah, or how many years does it take to?
Right.
finish that cost?
That's all, that's
That's
what I'm
part
trying to
of
figure
the,
out.
Yeah.
that's a great question. That's part of the mandate in our code update, rulemaking process. The issue though that I have is that compares the current code to the proposal for the updated code. Which is, that increment is getting less cost effective, the law of diminishing returns, right?
No, I
So
don't-
we're struggling. Well, let's just take ceiling insulation for an example. So, let's say the original code had R19 in the ceiling. First cycle of code updates, you double that to R39. That's a substantial savings at the cost of 12 inches of insulation. Then the next cycle, you update that to R49. The cost of that is roughly the same, but the incremental energy savings.
So like 10%.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
I
smaller,
think
so,
it's that.
yeah. So we're up against sort of that law of diminishing returns, but we have come up with a code update each cycle. That if you were to take out if you roll the cost of those upgrades into your mortgage, it would result in cash positive flow from day one. That's going to be much harder to do in the next cycle. So, sorry.
Right.
And there's other ways you could define cost
Flintstones.
effectiveness. That's the way that
The Flintstones.
goes into define
Yeah, that sounds like.
Yes.
cost effectiveness.
Yeah. Right, and that was, right, thanks for that. I mean, it was a point of sensitivity, like at
Yeah.
what point are investments cost effective?
Yeah, and I should point out, I mean, just in defense of the struggles that we had this past cycle, we're in a economic situation where mortgage rates are high. So
That's
that's
why
why,
I'm asking that.
yeah,
It's high,
yeah,
and
and
sure it's a high low labor force, therefore labor costs are high. So all of these things really can factor into our analysis when we're looking at it, which is part of the reason why, especially in the residential side, we end up having to go back on a lot of the things we wanted to do, like wall insulation, etc. And simply because it wasn't a feasible or practical additional cost for us to include.
But the only thing you're gonna see, again, just looking at light, the only thing you're gonna see actually drop back in cost is probably interest rates.
Yeah.
You aren't gonna see any of the other things you mentioned
Which
go
is,
backwards.
which is exactly why
Unless something horrible.
very difficult. The next update cycle is gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
As far as, because there's not a lot of additional wiggle room for us.
So there's not a lot of return.
There's not a lot of return, there's not a lot of cost effective savings.
Okay.
That we can get with the way that we are currently doing the cost effectiveness.
Thank you.
How do you deal with fuel costs, which are very spiky?
Fuel costs are always somewhat of a point of contention. Taking it as a snapshot in time is really difficult because obviously, you know, when we started doing it, I think the fuel costs were still relatively low. And then as we went through the process, they went greatly up. The EIA, I think, has like a 12-month or 2-year kind of like forecast where prices are, and I think we settled on doing I forget exactly how we done it, but it was like a 12-month rolling average, I think it was for fuel prices.
We picked a point in time, just because you look forward or backwards when you do the analysis, and sometimes fuel prices have come down and sometimes they've gone up, and so.
Nobody really knows.
I mean,
If we knew, we wouldn't be sitting here.
I mean, it's the same way as we selected the mortgage rate.
We actually use the
6%.
projection for mortgage rates. That's a lot easier to project and to use. The HFA, I think, came up.
They
with
help
that.
us with that, yeah.
Matt Sharp has his hand up.
Sorry.
Yeah, Matt. Please go
Hi,
ahead.
thank you, Senator. I think the cost that is more applicable to this group, or the savings and the cost, is how much does it cost to increase the baseline non-energy code compliant home to the code compliant home? So how much savings is there? And how much does it cost? Any mechanism we might recommend, how much will that cost? Whether that's an enforcement agency or an education plan. But the savings we really want to be looking at is what the baseline home is that's we know is non-compliant to the compliant home.
Agreed.
And I wonder, does anyone have those numbers yet? And Keith, maybe Efficiency Vermont and the department have worked those out, but curious to know. I'm not in those meetings.
We completed a residential market assessment, which kind of does look at existing conditions for homes, and we developed what's called the user-defined reference home, which basically takes that data and kind of creates the typical home, which in many cases is kind of like a code compliant in some areas and not quite code compliant in others. You know, basement insulation is always a difficult one for us, and there's a few other kind of areas, spaces, windows, for example, can be a bit of a problem. But we do have that data part of our 2022, I think it was, residential market assessment. We did create a user-defined reference home, which we look at programs for EVT, which they tend to use as their like baseline. We don't allow currently EVT, obviously, to put in savings for low home. But you know, we do know where the baseline home is, so we know where we have to focus attention, programs, and money in order to try and create as many code compliant homes in the future, while reflecting on the past. And obviously, it lets us know where potential opportunity for after construction programs in order to kind of address deficits within the current building stock are as well.
So on the consumer acceptance side, one of the things we've been running weatherization programs for years, and increasing the funding for them and all the rest of it. One of the points of hesitation on the homeowner side is, I'm not sure I'm going to be here long enough to realize the saving, on the return on the investment. And then one of the cures for that is if the marketplace itself would value that investment. And so I'm looking to Peter up on the screen there. In the last, 1 or 2 years, are you seeing home buyers looking into the energy efficiency of the homes they're buying, and is that supporting a higher price so that current homeowners can make an investment knowing that they could sell for more? Or are we still in a transition phase?
So, I think that's a great assumption. I think the bigger mover in the marketplace over the last 3 years has been, just a total lack of inventory to sell at all price points. But certainly at those lower price points, we just haven't had properties available. So, when a market is like that, I think it becomes less important. I remember, and this must have been maybe last year's, group, at some point, a gentleman from Montpelier saying, we knew this home was energy inefficient, but it was the only thing in our price range that we could purchase, so we bought it, and now they'll be making those improvements because they plan on living there a long time. But, I think that it would be very hard to prove in the current market conditions just because of the kind of the overheated marketplace we've been in. If we could go through kind of a natural cycle of highs and lows in real estate pricing, perhaps we will start to see that, but not so far.
Well, this is reminding me also, if I could jump in, about VHFA's RAP program, which looks at a different way of basically lengthening making a cost affordable by lengthening the payback and tying the loan for making that payback to the house or to the meter rather than to the electric meter rather than to the person.
Right.
And that, does anybody know how that program's been going? I heard that it was having a little difficulty with take up, and I don't know.
A couple dozen participants is my understanding.
I wonder if it'd be worth getting an update from the FAA on that.
Yeah. And when we worked on it, it was potentially, a game changer.
Yeah.
Because you weren't taking on the debt.
Right.
That sort of odd concept was that the debt lived on the meter, and
Yeah.
whoever was paying that meter was basically paying that financing off, but it would be cash flow positive. The project wouldn't be approved unless it was cash flow positive.
Right.
So-
And you make a cash flow positive by lengthening the term of the loan. And I was involved in basically setting up 3D Thermal, which is a incentive program, energy consulting and incentive program for affordable apartment housing statewide. And it took us a while to build a pipeline of projects for that. And I think that new programs just take some years to build a pipeline. So I'd be interested to hear from VHFA on that.
Sure. Chris Campany.
On the consider whether or not the state should adopt the statewide building code question. I know we're just looking at the costs and benefits, I believe. It would be helpful. I think FEMA's done some research on this, on the costs, relative costs of like the future owners of a home not built to code. And I think I can say from my own experience, just when you move into a house with substandard wiring, substandard plumbing, substandard grading, substandard structural, how much it costs in the future to basically redo all of that, so just because the house started falling apart and other things. But it'd be good just if we have, I know it's gonna be hard to kind of like come up with a Vermont dollar amount, but there must be research out there that kind of aggregates and quantifies what the costs are for a home built to code versus, over the lifespan of the property for those that don't. Because there's the upfront cost, but then there's the cost over time. What happens, and that's one of the reasons why FEMA has adopted as part of their state granting program, whether, as far as states getting points that Vermont can't get if you don't have an adopted building code. Because what they're recognizing is it costs the federal government a lot more money in states that don't have an adopted building code, because the homes just don't withstand the wear and tear. So.
Yeah, sure. I know that Jim Bradley last year had a bunch of photos, I think, for us of things gone amiss on things not built to code. And
that was the building energy code, right? So now I'm talking like I don't want to use myself as an example, but like our home built in 1975. The garage had no frost walls, no steel in the concrete, no gravel under the concrete. So they say $4,000 in 1975, so in 2023, we can spend $50,000 to rebuild the garage. That's actually to be able to reside the house, because everything will be catty on this.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. But then also just, I mean, as a landscape architect, I can say, looking at lots of homes, the grading failures, especially in this climate, we're getting heavier rain, how that then relates to, it's lighter scale flood damage, but just things that we don't,
Yeah.
that we don't have any eyes on right now, just costs going down the road.
Yeah.
Sandy, if it's you, I'm not sure I can take on it.
Yeah, well, right, so Sandy?
Thank you so much. I'm actually representing VBRA today because Jim couldn't get into the call. I want to say a couple things. One is that you folks are absolutely right that FEMA is trying to encourage building codes throughout the country because of the rise in catastrophic failures. So if a house is built to a recent code, it might have finish fixes after a flood, but it won't fall down due to the flood, like houses fell down in Plainfield last month. So, and people could die in a catastrophic failure. I also want to point out that I am really happy to do research if I can help in any way this year. It definitely can help give some background to any report that you make, and I'm happy to do that as a volunteer. I also am curious, maybe this will be next meeting, but how you might structure a cost discussion. It seems like there are a couple of categories. One is startup costs to change an authority or to however it's ended up to be advised, but to the legislature, but to create a more unified authority, there would be startup costs and then there would be ongoing costs. And the ongoing costs, I think we could assume we want them to be self-funding. So the question is working backwards and then also figuring out the effect on construction costs, which hopefully are minimal. And then I think it seems to me the other ongoing cost is staffing needs, figuring out how many actual people would be added in the government or if there would be additional contracts made that would be ongoing. VBRA and AIA Vermont started trying to flesh that out last year because we hoped that the conversation would go further last year. I sent Richard our draft. It really hadn't gone anywhere. It was just trying to make the structure of what might need to be looked at. Anyways, I've sent it to Richard. I hope it's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I did get it.
Okay. So I want to make sure we finish on time, and we have about 13 minutes. We have time scheduled at the end of toward the end of every meeting for public comment. And I don't know if we have anyone who's on this call that is representing the public or is a member of the public and would like to speak with the group. So if you're there, please sing out and then unmute yourself, say something or put up a hand. Don't want to miss anyone. I think we're good on that score. Everyone likes to finish. Matt, you're officially, I think, as a member of the public. I don't know if you were a very active member of the group last go round. If you want to speak to us a little bit, wearing your member of the public hat today.
Yeah, no, I just think it's I agree with putting the report together the way that we had last year. I think that was a very good way to illustrate everybody's feelings so that when we came to the legislature, the committee members and the members at large had the opportunity to see who was involved, what their opinions were, And then they were also reaching out to those that had positive, negative, or indifferent opinions about it. So I think that's a great course of work. And I think this, I like everything I've heard today. Thank you.
Great. All right. I'm having a moment of forgetting names. Is it Craig who's at Huntington Homes?
Oh, Jason.
Jason Webster.
Yeah, thank you. Is Jason continuing with us? Do you know? On this work?
Sandy said she was
Yeah.
on here representing that group, so she might have an input.
So VBRA has a little committee of about 4 to 5, now 5 people. And we're working all together. So Jason will definitely be involved at some point. But anyways, this is their busiest time of the year right now. Well, that and Christmas, but no one could get in Signal enough to participate today. But
Okay.
yes, the answer is yes. Thanks.
All right, great. I know that they were, this is the perverse side of chairing. It's like he often had something, like he wasn't that happy with something being said. So it's those dissenting voices, not to characterize his work. Is that's I don't want to lose. I don't want us to just fall into groupthink. So great. Well, I don't know if anyone on the screen or in the room has anything more that they would like to add, but I think at some point we'll probably want to run a little long. So let's get money in the bank and finish a little early today. Anything else? Richard, I see you thinking about saying something.
No, I was gonna say I move for adjournment.
All right.
Second.
That's good thinking.
There we go. We're in sync. All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We're off and running.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.